a quote when this was done. Governor said, "Incumbent upon us to reform this system." I couldn't agree with him more. But the word reform is very important in that sentence. Reform means change. Reform means change for the positive. We are not reforming. We are kicking the can down the road. We are not having savings. We are paying less than we otherwise would in the short term to only pay more, not only in the long term, but in the midterm. I had the opportunity last week to do a television show with a colleague on the other side of the aisle, and he talked a lot about these words: predictability, which I find very interesting. It's a little odd and it's a little hypocritical at the same time, because as you all know, and you're probably sick of hearing it, we've been saying those words day in and day out: predictability, sustainability, trust. But what I find difficult to understand is, I heard my colleague talk about, and there's been other people saying it too, we cut $900 million from the budget last year. Look at us, look what we did. Well, I would argue that number, but either way, you cannot speak of that type of thing in a vacuum. And what I mean by that is this: you cannot say you cut $900 million from a budget unless you necessarily talk about the rest of it. Unless you necessarily talk about the 2 highest tax increases in state's history. Unless you necessarily talk about the highest borrowing in state's history. Unless you necessarily talk about every anti-business bill that we have passed in this state. And the reason why you can't speak of them individually or in a vacuum is because they all make up the whole of what the state of Connecticut is. And they all make up the problem that we are now in. So you cannot fix the problem without addressing all the parts. On December 9th, we heard about an announcement which, from at least my perspective, gave me a lot of hope. Gave me a lot of hope because I heard the governor announcing that he, in conjunction with the state employee unions, had gotten together, opened up the contract, and made a deal, which I was very excited to hear about. And I remember saying at the time, I think that there's promise to this deal, but unfortunately, in a vacuum, it will not change anything that we have done in the state of Connecticut, and more importantly, it will not fix anything that we have done in Connecticut. And as many of my colleagues have talked about today, it's refinance, that's what this is. And when you do refinance in your home because you may be having some financial problems, you don't just do the refinance but keep the 2 Maseratis and the 5 vacations, right? Okay, we may have gotten rid of the Maseratis, we may have moved down to the Mercedes, but we're still not driving a Prius, guys. Okay? You cannot just do the refinance without making other fiscal changes to your life. Glad to see that we reached an agreement after looking at all the proposals. I don't know what other proposals there were. I mean, I think you can only have other proposals if there are other people involved in the conversation. I do understand that a conversation, negotiation between a governor and the union must stay between them. I understand that. I know that's how it works. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have had parallel conversations with every leader in this building to say, hey, what ideas do you have? What proposals do you have? As far as I know, those conversations were not had. They weren't had with me. Vin, were they had with you? Majority Leader, did you have them? I mean, you may have, I don't know. My point is, how do we know what the best solution is unless we know what the other solutions might have been? had the wonderful opportunity last week to speak to a group of state employees, and they were from different jobs, different departments, and it was very eye-opening for me, I have to say, and I'm going to tell you why. They were very clear that they didn't want to go back to the table and give any concessions, but the reason why they didn't was what was enlightening to me. Why should we, they said, come back, give concessions, when you are just going to spend our money on something? You spend too much. This is what they said to me. You spend too much. We don't trust you. I think it is our obligation to take them at their word. They don't trust us, and they shouldn't trust us. Funny, we stood here a year ago, I talked about how business didn't trust us. Business doesn't trust us. Unions don't trust us. Who else doesn't trust us? Hospitals don't trust us because we told them we'd give them the money, we never did. Transportation money never goes back to transportation. That's why we had a problem with a lockbox. And then there's the spending cap. It is our obligation in this chamber and this building to protect people's retirement security as we promised them. 50% of the state budget belongs to union costs. Therefore, investing in unions' retirement, and the word we gave them, is investing in the state of Connecticut. I don't know how we invest unless we make these kind of changes. I don't blame them for not wanting to come to the table, because this deal is not giving them anything. It is giving this building something, but it's not giving them anything. This may be the best deal in the whole wide world, but we don't know it because we didn't have any other options. And we lost the opportunity to make those structural changes. We suggested, as my colleagues have mentioned, when we talk about those concessions, let's take that money and invest it in their future and help fund that pension going forward. That is a way to start bringing trust back to our hard-working state employees. Because, guys, we haven't done it so far, I'll tell you that, and I had a rude awakening when they talked to me about it. If we are in this together, then we should be in this together. We should take this opportunity, go back to the table, and make the changes that move the state forward. I'm not saying this deal is the wrong deal. I'm saying it is not the right deal on its own. It's not the right deal in a vacuum unless we start to find a solution that will change something instead of pushing that debt out to our kids and our grandkids. Nothing is ever going to change in this state, and those hard-working state employees are not going to get what they deserve.